Hello everyone. So today we have the last chapter of Breathing for Confidence, and I want to thank those of you who came along on this journey with me and not only listened to the book but bought it, read it, reviewed it. If you haven't reviewed it, please do. I'd love you to. It helps a lot because obviously other people see the reviews and then make a decision whether they want to buy it as well or not. So I hope that these techniques that you've been looking at and following along with has helped you to begin to understand how beneficial optimal breathing is for you. I also hope that those of you who are looking at it more seriously will continue using the breathing techniques, because in the next book we get to the voice, and then you will be ready and breathing will be automatic. This optimal breathing will be automatic and we can focus more on the voice. So that's what we want to achieve. Okay, so this is the last chapter, as I said, in this small book, and I hope it was fun for you as much as it was for me. So this is chapter 7, as I said, and as always the chapter heading is Breathing Beyond the Physical, and there's always a little quote, and the quote for this one is, "As with all of life, breathing involves a regular rhythm. We breathe the world into ourselves as we inhale and become part of it as we exhale." And this quote is by me, Angelina Kalahari. So I just want to add that if you like these videos, please click like and share, and as I said before, if you subscribe to my channel, YouTube thinks I'm fabulous, and then I can make even more of these videos for you, which I'd love to do. Scott's beaming smile confirmed Jake's feeling that his performance had gone well. Scott walked further into Jake's dressing room, his hand extended for a high five. "You aced it, man. I'm so proud of you." As Scott bent down to hug Jake, Jake received a whiff of Scott's expensive cologne. The familiar scent reminded Jake how extraordinarily happy he felt about Scott's support. It was such a shame they usually couldn't see each other's performances, as they always seemed to be in separate shows on the same days. As Scott straightened, Martin's voice came from the doorway behind him. "That's more like it. Tonight I recognize the artist I signed. Why couldn't you perform like that the other night? But whatever, it doesn't matter now. You've just secured the next 6 months on your contract." Jake wondered if he'd missed something, because he knew he still had 6 months left on his contract. But Scott's reaction confirmed Jake's thoughts that it was a bit weird. Martin didn't seem to notice and walked further into the dressing room. He sat down in the only other chair available and made himself at home, crossing his ankles as he placed his feet on Jake's dressing table. Scott leaned against the dressing table and both friends continued to focus on Martin as he spoke. "I expect the reviews to be great tomorrow, Jake. I know it's sometimes difficult for artists to hear the audience reaction properly when they're on stage, but you certainly received a standing ovation tonight. So you must feel pretty chuffed with yourself. I guess I'll have to thank you for the congratulations I've been receiving as well." Jake and Scott exchanged glances when Martin spoke about how artists don't always hear the audience's applause. They knew it was second-hand knowledge, because Martin had never been on a stage in his life. Jake could never decide whether or not Martin was purposefully arrogant, but he was a good agent. So Jake put up with Martin's burbs. "Well, you're right about not always hearing the applause, Martin. I was still in character. I noticed people standing, so I knew they liked it, but I'm sure the applause and ovation was for the whole cast. They were all fantastic. Martin crossed his arms, a superior smile on his face. I was in the audience, and I saw what happened. Trust me when I tell you, it was aimed at you. Jake wasn't about to argue. If things happened the way Martin said they did, Jake was more than prepared to believe it. He'd worked very hard on his techniques since his lesson with Anne the previous day. Before he left her home, he suddenly understood exactly what he needed to do for the techniques to work correctly. It excited him. So, when Jake got home, he continued to practice until the techniques felt comfortable and more natural. During tonight's performance, he could feel the techniques working. It wasn't a surprise when his voice flew from his mouth and confidence anchored his character in his body. Often, after performances, he was exhausted, but tonight his body vibrated with the energy and excitement he'd experienced on stage. He wished he could do it again immediately. It was the best sign that things went well. Jake was still thinking about his performance when he noticed Scott talking to Martin. "Martin, we're going for some drinks. Would you like to join us?" Jake saw Martin's eyes flick from him to Scott and back again. "Oh, forgive me, Martin, this is Scott. I told you about him. Scott is my best friend and an incredible singer. We spent our lives studying with the same singing teachers and voice coaches." "I remember you saying it, yes. This is the Scott you want me to audition, right?" Jake and Scott answered simultaneously. "Yes." Martin nodded. "Okay. I'll come for a quick one with you guys." Jake removed his makeup at once, and while Scott and Martin chatted, he got changed out of his costume. Because Martin said he only had an hour to spend with them before he had to go to another appointment, Jake was keen to get out of the theatre, but it seemed to take him forever because everyone stopped him. "Well done, man! You are awesome! Can't wait to work with you again soon." The praise was accompanied with slaps on Jake's back and hugs and kisses from everyone he met as he walked down the corridor. Meanwhile, Scott and Martin were waiting for him outside the stage door. By the time Jake joined them, they were deep in discussion about Scott's skills and abilities and how Martin could help him. Jake was grateful for the moment of introspection their conversation afforded him as the three of them walked down the street to a nearby pub. They chose a table near the door, and as they sat down, Jake couldn't help feeling relieved Martin wasn't castigating him as usual. It was even more surprising when Martin offered to get their drinks. As Martin went to the bar, Scott turned to Jake. "Are you sure you don't want to hang out with the rest of your cast? You were truly amazing, Jake. They might want to celebrate with you." "Nah. We see each other every night, and we've had loads of drinks together already. Anyway, I'm thrilled you came to see me tonight and that my performance was such a success, so I'd much rather spend time with you instead." Thankfully, Martin was true to his word and stayed for only one drink. But Jake couldn't help feeling a little on edge while Martin sat with them. He realized he'd become so used to Martin's criticisms that he'd come to expect them. As Martin downed his beer, he got up. "Right, it's time for me to be off." He extended his hand towards Scott. "I'll see you in my office tomorrow, Scott, and don't forget to bring your documents as we discussed." Scott stood up and shook Martin's hand, and the friends watched as he left the pub. After Martin had gone, Jake and Scott travelled to central London to a quiet pub in Covent Garden they both loved and knew wouldn't be too busy. When each had a drink and was seated in a quiet corner away from everyone else, Scott turned to Jake. "So, I see you've had huge success in your studies with Anne already." "Yes, I'm so grateful for you, for helping me. She's as brilliant as you said she was. The way she teaches and explains everything makes complete sense to me, and her instructions are straightforward and hugely effective. I wish I'd known about her years ago. We haven't started working on the voice yet because we're still working on breathing, but I'm grateful because even just the breathing work has already helped me enormously. Scott took a sip of wine and smiled before he spoke. She is brilliant. Do you remember when I studied at that prestigious conservatoire in France? Jake nodded and took a sip of wine, waiting for Scott to continue. We spent the first 6 months on breathing. I kept wondering when we'd ever get to singing. I'm glad it happened that way, though, because it gave me a great foundation. But the way Anne teaches the techniques makes it easy and quick to learn. I'm so grateful I found her, because the breathing techniques alone has transformed my entire career. Jake nodded more emphatically. Though I always knew breathing was vital for good voice production, I had never been taught in this way before. You saw the results for yourself tonight. Scott leaned back in his seat. You know, I've learned so much from Anne about breathing techniques, but I've also had some other intriguing conversations with her about breath. Jake shifted into a better position. He could feel an exciting discussion coming, and he loved the amazing conversations he had with Scott. They frequently talked about topics that fascinated them both, and it was one reason Jake so loved spending time with Scott. Like what? Scott took another long sip of his wine, his eyes twinkling mischievously over the glass. Jake knew Scott was teasing him. He slapped Scott on the shoulder. Come on, spit it out. Scott put his glass down and leaned away from Jake as he laughed. Okay, stop hitting me. Well, then stop winding me up. Even though they sat next to each other, Scott turned his body so he faced Jake fully. One thing Anne talks about is the molecules of air. You know, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, argon, methane, and small amounts of other gases we breathe in. She also made me think about our air containing water vapor, dust particles, plant grains, and other solid particles. She says just because we can't see these molecules doesn't mean they don't have a shape, mass, and perhaps even colour. I've read up on it because of my chat about it with her. I've discovered air has mass and weight because it's matter. Jake nodded. Interesting. I never really think about that when I breathe in, and I'm sure most people never think about it either. Exactly. It's another good reason for optimal breathing, according to Anne, to get rid of all the stuff that accumulates at the bottom of our lungs. But imagine she's right and we could see the air we breathe. Jake pursed his lips. I wonder if it would look like water or smoke or a grid of some sort. Scott continued enthusiastically. It might mean we could see the pattern the air makes as it enters our nostrils. Anne talks about how when air enters our body, it connects with our cells, which carry our memories, our intent, thoughts, and desires. So imagine when we breathe out. Not only would we see the pattern of the air as it leaves our body, but it'll also be infused with our essence in the form of our memories, intent, thoughts, and desires. It'll have a different energy than the air that entered our body. It might even have a different colour, and because energy can't die and is transformed, our essence has transformed the air we breathe out. It flows from us into the ether, into the air breathed by other humans, animals, and plants. Jake sat up straighter. Oh wow, I've never thought about breath in that way. If we breathe in others' thoughts, intentions, and energy, what is the effect on us? What is our effect on the world? Maybe it's a way for us to send out our thoughts and desires into the universe, to return to us as manifestations of those thoughts and desires, Do you think it's far-fetched to imagine that someone else would breathe in our thoughts and desires and respond to them? Scott smiled at Jake's excitement. I don't see why not. If it's true, and if we believe such a circular exchange happens, could we also believe that breathing is a far more profound action than merely supplying us with life-giving oxygen? Jake let out a low whistle. Yes, and it puts a whole different spin on how stage performers especially affect the audience and vice versa. But I see what you mean. Wouldn't it be awesome if our breath has another function altogether, one we know nothing about yet? Scott nodded, his expressive eyes thoughtful, as Jake continued. I'm now even more excited to work on my voice with Anne. If she has these thoughts and ideas around breath, I can't begin to imagine what she says about voice. Scott's enigmatic smile confirmed Jake's hunch. So, that's the end of this little book and the end of talking about breathing in this way. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll let me know in the comments below your thoughts and feelings about this. I'd be so interested to know what you think. Until next time, I'll see you then.